Hello, listener, and welcome to a special Thanksgiving novella of Bite-Sized Tales, the audio flash fiction podcast. In today's bonus episode, we hear 3 stories around Thanksgiving or giving thanks.
A Thanksgiving to Remember. Written and read by Wayne Cole. I used to think that the worst thing you could do to a turkey was dry it out during cooking. Then I tried the rehydrated Thanksgiving Day meal that NASA had packed for us. It was nice to have something different for a change, and I was grateful they thought to pack us something special for the holiday. It really was a thoughtful gesture, but all it did was remind me that my family was back home, sitting together at a dinner table, worrying about whether I would make it home or not. I did take little comfort in knowing that without me there to cook it, the turkey was probably pretty dry. Making the perfect Thanksgiving Day bird is more of an art form than a science, and in that one area, I am an artist. You know, I was dreading this because I thought it would taste kind of like turkey jerky. I looked up to see the mission commander, Genevieve Norton, floating in the mess compartment with me. Strands of her blonde hair floated around her head like she was touching one of those globes that make your hair stand with static electricity. Now that I've eaten it, I wish it tasted like turkey jerky. I laughed. I guess it's the thought that counts, Commander. Are you missing a real dinner back home? Yeah, normally I'd be gathered around my brother's table, digging into the full spread and making plans for Christmas. She looked sad for a moment. My brother and I both went no contact with my stepfather after Mom passed. He tried to flirt with my girlfriend when I brought her to Thanksgiving, and that's probably the least offensive thing he did that year. I'm just thankful I have such a supportive brother. How about you? What's your Thanksgiving tradition? Well, my wife and I have hosted the last few years since the kids were born. It's a big meal with my parents, both my brothers, and my sister. Plus all of their families, of course. I have to make 2 of the largest turkeys I can find every year, and no matter how much mashed potatoes I make, it never seems to be enough. I laughed a little, remembering my nephew holding the empty wooden spoon to tell me we were out of potatoes. We have a family rule of no Christmas talk until after we eat. The meal itself is about sharing stories and catching up on the past year. I'm not sure if that sounds really nice or just really crowded. I chuckled. A little bit of both, actually. I sucked on my squeeze pouch of mashed potatoes and was grateful that they were much more palatable. I guess it helps they've had almost 100 years to get instant potatoes right. You know, when I signed up for this mission, I knew there'd be missing some holidays, but I don't think I realized just how hard it would be. Yeah, this is a difference between logically knowing and actually experiencing. You probably also never thought you'd really be going, since you were one of the alternates. I couldn't help but see how you looked after our morning report, and figured you could probably use some company for dinner. I'm not your family, but I'm here, and I'm told I'm a good listener. That you are, Commander. Don't sell yourself short, though. We were on the first mission to Mars together. According to my Bernice, if you bring me back home safely, that makes you family, and she expects to see you over for dinner on a regular basis. Well then, I best make sure we all get back because I've heard stories about your cooking. Well, Commander, after 21 months of food like this, I think I could cook you a shoe and you'd enjoy it. Besides family, what do you miss most about Thanksgiving this year? I thought about her question. There were so many things I could have answered, but most of them really did come back down to family. That's what Thanksgiving is about for me. Finally, though, it hit. The scent of cooking food. Fresh rolls baking, one turkey roasting and the other in the smoker, pecan and pumpkin pie. My mouth is watering just thinking about the aromas filling the house. Now you're making me hungry. And I know we don't have anything that'll live up to that description. We both laughed and continued to share stories of home, me of my large family, and her of her brother. The food was horrible, and it might not have been the most traditional Thanksgiving Day meal, but it was still a Thanksgiving that I would never forget. And now a word from our author. I wrote this story in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. It was the first Thanksgiving in as long as I could remember that I didn't have any kind of traditional family dinner. Like so many things that year, Thanksgiving was canceled, and I didn't realize how much I was missing it. When I sat down to write a story themed around Thanksgiving, it was only natural for me to write one that involved missing out. I think, like so many stories I was writing during that time, the very writing of the story was a form of working out what was going on in my own head at the time, and just dealing with life.
Hey, thanks. Written and read by Chris Hussey. Hey, thanks. I spoke the words of gratitude to the person across from me as I placed my hand on their shoulder. That shoulder, and the rest of the body attached to it, belonged to my best friend, Jerry. I was feeling so good about things. I just had to express that good feeling. And so the shoulder touch was the added extra to the words I spoke. Jerry was and is truly a fantastic human being, always willing to lend an ear, a hand, or even a shoulder to cry on. Now, granted, the shoulder of his I currently cupped in my hand I hadn't cried on in this particular instance, but there were more than a few times in the past that I had. But, as I said, this wasn't one of them. This was, in point of fact, something else entirely. Don't mention it. Jerry spoke in his signature casual, dismissive tone. It's a tone that never offends and always carries with it its own sense of gratitude. And while I believed the words and the intent behind them, I still found myself compelled to respond to what he said. I felt this way because what Jerry had just done for me truly deserved thanks, and I wanted to emphasize that. He had to know how truly grateful I was. No, I need to mention it. You really stepped up when you didn't have to, and that means a lot to me. I want you to know that, Jerry. I drove my words home with as much sincerity as I could muster. It wasn't hard for me to do so because I was being truly sincere. Jerry chuckled in response, lowering his head and giving it a small shake. He waved at my words as he spoke, as if trying to deflect them. Seriously, don't mention it. Now, I'm not one to get easily irritated, especially when I've just been given a great kindness like Jerry had just given me. But something in Jerry's demeanor in response to my gesture of gratitude sent a small tingle of agitation through my brain. Why wouldn't he accept my thanks? Was he accepting it and I was just not understanding? Did he really not want me to mention my thanks? And if so, why? That agitation suddenly swelled and compelled me to find out. Why do you say that? I asked, my tone trying to strike a neutral balance. Say what? Telling me to not mention it. Mention what? Jerry asked. He was starting to sound confused, which seemed odd considering these were the first real words we spoke since we started working on the project just completed. Mention giving thanks to you. Wait, are you asking me why I said don't mention it after you said thanks? I could see in Jerry's eyes that he was trying to piece together a puzzle. I didn't think my question was confusing, but perhaps it was. Perhaps I was. Regardless, I pressed on. Yeah, I guess. I would think if I didn't say anything, then that would make me the rude one. I'm not going to have you do what you just did for me and not say thank you. So the reality is I absolutely have to say thanks. I mean, what you did was something most folks just wouldn't do. Dude, it's a figure of speech. There was an overlaying tone of irritation that covered Jerry's words. This was starting to confuse me even more because I've never heard Jerry get upset before, or irritated, if I was being honest with myself. I know that this was probably something I should have just left right then and there, but oddly, I found myself continuing. But it's a strange one, right? Strange what, man? Figure of speech. Jerry looked at me like I was almost speaking a foreign language, but I could also tell that he probably wanted me to explain. I felt confident that by the time this was all over, he'd understand where I was coming from and hopefully would not only agree with me, but fully accept my thanks. I continued. Yeah, a strange figure of speech. Think about it. When you say, don't mention it, what you're really doing is asking for or giving permission to the other person or people to not express gratitude. You're effectively trying to suppress a positive human emotion, but for what purpose? So you don't have to feel that from others? Well, that doesn't make much sense. I think what's really happening here is that by saying, don't mention it, you are creating a sense of sadness and misery in the other person. It's an effort, whether purposeful or accidental, to turn a good thing into something not good at all. Jerry looked at me with a blank face. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure if I was still trying to figure things out or if there was something else happening behind his pleasant complexion. After what seemed like an extremely long time, but in actuality was only about 37 seconds, Jerry spoke, but not before putting his own hand on my shoulder and squeezing it. Dude, I think what's happening here is you are feeling an incredible rush of adrenaline, or you're starting to crash from said rush, and it's affecting your brain, messing with your thought process. I've seen this happen more than a few times. It makes sense. You've been through a traumatic experience. This is not the first time I've helped a friend bury the body of someone he just killed. Hell, I helped Dean just last week. He experienced the same thing. I had to listen to him go on about some bullshit regarding Southeast Asian economics for nearly 15 minutes. I barely understood a word of it. Now it was my turn. I'm sure that my face must have had a blank expression on it as I took in Jerry's words. Everything he said suddenly made sense. While I certainly stood by my points, I immediately realized this was not the time and place for such a debate. The body was dead and almost buried. We needed to finish the task, cover our tracks, and leave this area. Talking about the semantics of the English language was absolutely pointless at this time and place. A smile came across my face, and Jerry mimicked it, and then continued to speak. Plus, with Dean's, it was really messy. Just ridiculous. It took forever to clean up. You at least had the decency to make yours a clean kill and have everything fairly well contained. I looked at Jerry. A new wave of gratitude washed over me. Not only had he helped me in my time of need and disposal of the corpse, but now he was complimenting me on how well the kill was done. The gratitude swelled up, and once again, I couldn't help myself. Hey, thanks, I said. Jerry continued to look at me. Don't mention it. Author's note. So this is a good example of a story that turns out differently than maybe you intended it to. The story follows the general idea here where these two individuals, the two characters, debate some semantics in regards to saying thanks and saying don't mention it, that kind of thing. But the goal of the story originally was to not mention what the activity was that happened here. But I realized as I was writing that was something I wasn't going to be able to avoid, and so I thought I would have it take a very strange left turn to be something absolutely unexpected in regards to what the activity was, because hopefully the story built up that tension as to finding out what Jerry did that was so helpful that deserved this level of thanks analysis. Anyway, I'm still very happy with how it came out and hope you enjoyed it. And if you celebrate Thanksgiving, have a happy one.
Gather Around, written and read by Dot Moore. Over the years, I've held generations. I've supported and maintained stability, keeping my legs beneath me and my surface strong for those that needed me. I am warmed by your meals, but scarred by the rush of your life. Yet I stand, strong and firm like the mighty oak I was cut from. I've watched as year after year I chip away a little more, every scratch and dent just one more impact you've left on my existence. But I'm here for you. You rest your plates upon me and share your days with one another. Your words seep into the grooves of my grain, and I hold on to each precious memory. Pen marks that slipped off the edge of a page of homework, and coffee cup rings mar my faded gloss stain. I carry them all, gladly. The houses I reside in and families I seat are individually beautiful in their own ways. I'm lucky to find myself with so many and have lasted this long. I was purchased by a newlywed couple moving into their first home. It was a showpiece on the floor surrounded by all other manner of building blocks to furnish a home. They bargained for a good price and eventually settled. I was broken down just enough to fit on the roof of their car, my legs posted up in the back seat. They brought me inside and reassembled me together, just the two of them. Years went by, and as their family grew, their needs changed. I was sold to my next family, and they put me in a yard sale 3 years later. From there, I was taken to a local college sorority house. The ladies there took great care of me, but once again, I was eventually passed off to the next people that needed me. This will likely be my final use. The couple that bought me didn't seem to need much. They appeared simple enough people. A few frat boys brought me to my new house as a courtesy to the sorority and the couple. Strapping young men made me feel like I was weightless. They loaded me into the space adjacent to the kitchen, a familiar spot for me. The couple sat in my chairs across from each other and held hands atop my surface. They spoke softly to one another, the man patting his wife's fingers. "They'll be here this year. Everyone will be here with us. It'll be perfect. You'll see." A few weeks came and went, and I sat the lovely couple for morning coffee and shared meals. The man, who I came to know as Pops, read the newspaper, and his wife, Gloria, hooked her crochet basket over the spindle of her chair as she worked on whatever project she had going. It was a routine I fell very comfortably into, knowing this would likely be my last home. I could feel the atmosphere shift. This morning, Gloria came downstairs in her robe and immediately broke out the pots and pans, clamoring a few things about and roughly setting things on me. She seemed anxious. That's when I saw it. The thawed bird hurled out of the fridge, brined and ready for the oven. Today is my day, the day I'm needed most. A gathering of family and friends around me, celebrating all that they're thankful for, and I support them through it. A wave of purpose washed over me. The gears where the leaf had been stuck for years tightened, and the slight sag in my middle corrected itself. This year is important. I can feel it. Several hours into the day, people began to arrive. The first car that pulled into the drive had both Pops and Gloria rushing to the door. I could hear their hushed words of disbelief that anyone would actually come, and the heartwarming joy at the reality of their loved ones arriving to celebrate with them. Throughout the hour, the house filled quickly with people. Young ones hung along the stairwell banister, then rushed through the house to crawl and hide under me. If I could, you'd have surely seen a smile form in my brain. Pops rounded everyone into the kitchen, and just as before, for many years in other homes like this one, people surrounded me and expressed their gratitude for the meal before them, and for the comfort of this home and their love for each other. And I was there, in one life or another. I have been there since the beginning, a table for anyone and everyone to gather at. Author's note. With this being our next holiday novella, I wanted to stay within somewhat of a traditional perception for the story, but from a different perspective. I thought about all the stereotypical things that are usually included at a Thanksgiving gathering and thought it'd be way too morbid to write as the turkey, so I focused on something inanimate that still is a centralized point to celebrating the holiday, and I kept coming back to the dinner table. Whether it was at my grandparents' home, my mom's, or even my own, we spent the majority of our time circled around the table, spooning tastes of this and that into our plates. There was always that telltale moment of silence as everyone sits, eating and enjoying the meal, and I felt that the table itself was the best vehicle to relay that story. Hope you enjoyed!
This chapter of Bite-Sized Tales has been brought to you under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, no derivatives 4.0 international license. Intro and outro music is Cocktail Hour by Aaron Kenny, provided to the YouTube audio library. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we greatly appreciate reviews and recommendations to your friends. For more information about our authors, please visit bitesizedtales.com or follow us on Instagram at bite_size_tales. We look forward to reading to you next time.